Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Thursday, July 23rd, and we will be hearing the presentation, Ethics for Planners. We've got a good group of panelists today. We've got a lot of folks on the line. This is going to be a good hour and a half, so settle in. For your content questions related to the presentation, you can type those in your questions box located in the GoToWebinar tool panel. And we will normally we answer them at the end of the presentation, but we're just doing everything all different today. So we're going to be answering questions trickled throughout the presentation. And also, because this is an ethics session and it is a little different, we also invite you to comment. If you have thoughts about particular scenarios or thoughts on any of the things that our panelists are saying, feel free to type those in and we'll see if we can get those broadcasted out. If you have any issues with technology, you can also type those in your chat box and I'll do my best to help you there as well. Coming up on your screen is a list of our sponsoring chapters and divisions for 2020. Thanks to all of those participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today, in particular, we are sponsored by the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association in conjunction with one of their sections, the Central Ohio section. So thank you, APA Ohio, for hosting today's ethics session. Coming up next on your screen is actually a screenshot of our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And this is where you're going to see a list of all of our upcoming sessions. We're actually booked every Friday through the rest of this year. And we are starting to book Wednesdays and Thursdays now as well, just to meet the demand of our current normal. So you can see and register for all of our upcoming webcasts on our webcast webpage. Like I said, this is a screenshot of our webpage. So you're going to see some tabs up at the top, and I just want to explain them real quick. The prior webcast tab, we have PDF copies of all of our presentations available there for download. And the distance education tab, we do have a few sessions that are available for on-demand viewing through the end of this year, one law, one ethics. So if you need those credits or you're interested in those topics, just click on that tab and you can get all the information that you need. This session has been approved for 1.5 CM Ethics credits for live viewing. And for those AICPers, you can log those credits by heading over to planning.org, logging into your My APA account. And from there, you can either search by today's title, by APA Ohio chapter, or by the event number, which is on the screen. If you don't get a chance to copy all that down, just head over to our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, and all that information is there for you. Let's be friends. Like us on Facebook. Just search Planning Webcast on Facebook. That's where we list any changes to our schedule, particularly if we have a new webcast that's coming up or if we have to change the date of a webcast, that's where we post that. And subscribe to our YouTube channel because we record all of our sessions and post them there. We have over 3,000 subscribers, over 300 videos. So be sure to click the red button and subscribe to us so that you stay in the know and on top of all of our weekly webcasts. I think that's it for my spiel. Like I said, be sure to just type those questions in as they come, type those comments in as they come, and we'll be answering them throughout. And make sure you stay engaged because we're going to be doing a lot of polling questions throughout this session. So be sure and stay tuned in here. I'm going to turn it now over to Megha Sinha, who is going to make some introductions and lay some groundwork before today's session begins. So Megha, I invite you.
Thanks, Christine. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the Planning Webcast series. Today's session, Ethics for Planners, is brought to you by the APA Ohio chapter and the Central Ohio section. My name is Megha Sinha. I'm principal with the planning consulting firm MBBJ. I serve on the Ohio APA Central section, APA Ohio Central section, and the APA Ohio board. As part of the Ohio chapter board, I chair our recently formed Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. I'm thrilled to have planners and non-planners alike from across the nation participate in today's important topic. The session today explores the challenging question of how Black Lives Matter movement should impact the planning profession moving forward. The session will include an overview of the AICP Code of Ethics and will apply the code to ethical scenarios drawing on speakers' experiences. Specifically, it will zero in on Section A.1F that calls on certified planners to seek social justice and promote racial and economic integration. The session will feature a panel discussion and interactive polling questions. It is my honor to introduce our three esteemed panelists today. Jacqueline McRae, PhD, is a member of the AICP. She has more than 25 years of experience in local government management, 9 of those years with the city of Cincinnati, where she was a budget analyst, project manager, and land use planner. Since joining Management Partners as a senior manager, Jacqueline has been a key staff member on numerous projects analyzing development review processes, performance measurement, and organizational review. Jacqueline previously served as a member and vice chairperson of the Cincinnati City Planning Commission. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
Greg Dale is a founding principal with McBride Dale Clarion. Greg is a fellow of the AICP and has been active in the planning profession for almost 40 years. He has managed planning projects throughout the country and has expertise in regional plans, comprehensive plans, growth management plans, land use regulations, citizen outreach programs, planning for historic areas, and expert testimony on planning, zoning, and land use development issues. Greg is co-author of an update to the Citizen's Guide to Planning and the Planning Commissioner's Guide. Welcome, Greg. And finally, Todd Kinskey is a fellow of the AICP with over 27 years of experience as a professional planner. He joined the city of Dayton in 2018 as its Director of Planning and Community Development and oversees the daily operations of the department and its 4 divisions. Prior to his appointment in Dayton, he was employed by Hamilton County in Ohio for over 23 years, serving as planning director for almost 10. Todd has served on numerous boards and commissions, including as the president of our very own Ohio chapter of the APA. And so welcome, Todd, as well. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. Dale, the floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you, Megha, and thank you all for joining in. What I'd like to do here for a few minutes is just to introduce the session a little bit more, expand a little bit on what Megha talked about, tell you what we're going to be doing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Todd and Jacqueline. So the slide that you see in front of you, the purpose slide, as Megha indicated, we want to use this session to explore the code of ethics in light of the constantly evolving protest movement. And given the requirement, as you'll see in the code of ethics, that planners shall seek social justice, we'll see more about that in just a minute, we want to raise some difficult questions for us as professional questions about what obligations that code provision in particular creates for us, how we do the right thing under the code of ethics, what the right thing is, and particularly acknowledge that many of us who are obligated to abide by that code often work in communities where social justice issues are not necessarily a high priority for the community, and in some cases may not be embraced by the community at all. So these are difficult questions that we need to be thinking about as planners. And you see some of the images that you see on that slide are just representative of some media depictions of the issue. It's interesting. As we've worked on this session, we keep coming across articles. Articles seem to be coming out daily where people are talking about things like the role that zoning plays in segregation kinds of issues. So it's a very timely issue. It's an issue that I think is putting planners on the forefront of discussing it, and we think it's very important. Let me talk about just for a second about how this session evolved. When we first got the request from the Central Ohio section to do this, it was before the pandemic started. It was envisioned to be a live session, and at that time we were thinking that it would be kind of the typical AICP training ethics training session that Todd and I in particular have done a lot of in Ohio. But a couple of things happened in the meantime. So one of those obviously was on May 25th, George Floyd died at the hands of police officers, and that started a protest movement that has spread not just nationally but globally. Virtually every community in this country has seen some form of protest. So that started us thinking about that a little bit. But the other thing that happened is we got an email. So Todd, why don't you go to the next slide. And I'm going to violate all PowerPoint rules here and show you 2 slides that have a lot of words on them. But I want you to understand what this is. This is an email that we received from a client in a suburban community, a suburban county. And this was from a planning commission member in that suburban county. So it's not a professional planner, it's a planning commission member. And you can see the language in front of you. Let me just kind of walk you through it. And again, I know that this is a lot of words, but there's 2 slides of this. I thought about editing it down, but really I think it's so powerful and so poignant. I didn't really want to change that author's words. So let's just walk through this for a second. So it's been a rough couple of weeks all across the country. Like all of us here, I've been thinking a lot about how racism is baked into so many aspects of society, not just in policing and the criminal justice system in general, but also in how school attendance boundaries are drawn and how our public education system is funded, and how we spend more tax dollars on deductions and exemptions for relatively wealthy land or homeowners than on support for low-income renters. It's in the zoning ordinances in just about every local government in the country too, with rules that favor homeowners over renters and the most expensive types of housing over even modest multifamily homes like duplexes. But I'm really grateful that we all have an opportunity over the next year to do our part to extract racial and economic inequities from our county zoning code. Wherever we can. This will take some listening and some learning and some empathy, but I'm confident we can do this. Next slide. The events of the last couple of weeks and the growing support for dismantling injustice wherever it lurks demands that we try. Our current zoning ordinance is from 1997. That's 23 years of massive change in our country and our county. Let's not get to 2040 or so when the next big revision is done and look back at this moment as a wasted opportunity to set a better path for development in our community that is more inclusive of all our neighbors, regardless of race or wealth. In doing so, not only will we make our county more equitable, but we'll also take a step towards showing the incessant housing price and rent growth that harms many of our community while also pushing back against sprawl so that we can keep our rural areas rural and reduce transportation costs and emissions. Zoning ordinances are one of the many big structural policies that impact so many aspects of life, and I hope we can make some positive changes in our ordinance between now and next summer. So I got that, and it really just started me thinking about this issue a little bit more, and in talking to Todd and then Jacqueline, we just decided that this is a discussion that we need to have. We are not going to pretend to have the answers here, but we think it's a conversation that needs to be held. So with that, let me just take a second and put a couple of AICP code issues on the table, and then I'll turn it over to Todd. So for those of you on the call here that are AICP, you will recognize that the Code of Ethics has a couple of parts. There's actually two key parts to the Code of Ethics. And I want to emphasize this because it goes to the issue that we're going to be talking about. And that is, there are first ethical principles to which we aspire, what you can refer to as the Section A, aspirational principles. And then there's the rules of conduct, which are the Section B. In addition, there's a third thing, which is the ethical principles of planning, which is not part of AICP. It's published by the American Planning Association, and it's encouraged ethical principles for all people involved in planning, planning commission members, citizens, anyone who's interested in planning. But those first two, Part A or Section A and Section B, are really what's critical. But here's the important distinction to understand. Section A are aspirational principles. And as you'll see, even though those use words like shall, they're aspirational principles. And what that means is that there is no potential for charge of misconduct, no disciplinary action that planners can be subject to by not achieving those ethical principles. And again, that's going to be important here in just a minute as we talk about it. Section B are the rules of conduct, and those are prohibited conduct kinds of things. Those are put in terms of shall not do certain things. Those are largely related to behavior of planners, and those are the provisions that are subject to disciplinary action. We as AICP could literally lose our certification if we don't comply with those. The reason I place such an emphasis on that is the principle we're going to focus on today is the aspirational principle A1F. So if any of you have your code, you can go right to it. And that is the principle that says we shall seek social justice by working to expand choice and opportunity for all persons. And I won't read the whole thing, you can see it. But I think that last sentence is particularly important. We shall urge the alteration of policies, institutions, and decisions that oppose such needs. So this is a really interesting language to me. Those of us as planners who have written plans or policies or goals and we've written regulations, we're very careful about the words that we choose. And it's interesting that this is structured as a mandatory thing, that we shall do this. But at the same time, it's in the aspirational principles, which means that if we don't, as professional planners, if we don't do it, we're not subject to disciplinary action. And so it seems to put this kind of somewhere in the middle of mandatory and voluntary. So I just say that because I think that's one of the things that as planners we wrestle with. This provision has been in the code for several decades. My understanding is it actually was moved into the aspirational principles somewhere back in the 90s, but be that as it may, that's where it is. So that's going to be the principle that we're going to focus on in particular here. There are a couple of other related ones, Todd, if you go to the next slide, that I think are important to keep in mind, because one of the issues that I think about when I look at that social justice principle is, the question, well, what are we supposed to be doing? How do we seek social justice as planners? And I think it's important to look at that in context with some of the other aspirational principles that you see here. So for example, I think about this as what are the things that the planning profession considers itself to be unique at, and I think these are some of those, looking at long-range consequences of decisions, looking at the interrelated nature of decisions, providing good information and data for people to have when making decisions, creating processes that people can use in engaging with the public. Those are the things that planners are good at. So I look at these as being linked. You could almost take that social justice requirement and saying, how do we seek social justice? We help people understand the long-range consequences of things like zoning decisions. We help people understand the interrelatedness of land use decisions to social issues. Those are some of the things that planners can bring to the table. So I think it's important to look at those in connection with each other. So that's the framework, that's the introduction. So what we're going to do now is Todd, excuse me, Todd is going to talk a little bit about how the planning organizations have been responding to this issue. Jacqueline is going to talk about a particular issue that she's had some experience with, and then we're going to put a couple of scenarios, as we typically do with these ethics training sessions, up and have some polling slides. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd.
Thank you, Greg. I just have a couple slides before I hand it over to Jacqueline, but since the George Floyd incident and all of the social unrest, we've all seen all these companies coming out with statements, and I've kind of joked with some coworkers about, when the Levi Strauss comes out with a statement about their beliefs, am I going to buy jeans or not buy jeans? I don't know that really impacts my decision on that. So what I like about what's happening with APA at a national level and also at the state chapter level here in Ohio is that it's more action oriented. So I think this session goes right along with that, and basically, us challenging ourselves and asking ourselves as planners and the profession, so what are we going to do about this? And if you pay any attention at all to what APA National sends you in the way of emails, there's a lot going on. So I just grabbed a couple images of some things that they're doing. So they're doing this video series regarding voices of equity in planning, and there's a recent Journal of American Planning Association article that looks at the history of racial inequality in planning. And then they're also doing a housing session for folks that looks at zoning, kind of something Greg already brought up in terms of how that plays into the history of our country and specifically the definition of family and how different jurisdictions use that definition as a way to kind of keep people in or out. There are a whole bunch of other things. In fact, I believe I had an email. I went back trying to find it, but I feel like I get so many emails from APA. about the next issue of the Planning Magazine is going to focus on issues of equality. So look for that if you haven't already gotten it. Here in Ohio, and I know we got listeners from all over the place, but I'm on the board for APA Ohio, and we at our last board meeting really had a long discussion about this issue, and ultimately there was a decision to form a task force, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. And we really started looking internally at our organization and the makeup of our membership. And I think over 1,400 plus members, and only 5% of them are Black or African American or identify as such. So there's some early things that are on the list to discuss are listed here. I'm not going to read them to you, but essentially what we're trying to explore is, how do we increase diversity in the chapter, both in membership and on our boards and commissions? How do we strategically reach out to our universities and educational partners? How do we get more students involved, get more students geared up to go into planning as a profession? And so for me, this is the takeaway for me is like, what's the action we're going to do? What are we going to try to do to address this matter? So anyway, I just wanted you to know that's what we're doing here in Ohio. And I hope that similar efforts are happening in your chapter in whatever state you may be in. And if not, I hope that these are things that you're going to be considering soon. So with that, we are going to now move over to Jacqueline to present.
Jacqueline, if you could unmute yourself.
I'm unmuting myself.
There you are. Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Greg and Todd and Christine. There are a lot of ways as we ask ourselves as planners, how do we invoke this aspirational principle, of seeking social justice and working to expand choice and opportunity for all persons. So because I'm in the consulting business these days, that's not specifically related to urban planning, and because planning is my first love, I work with a local development corporation, and I'll tell you a little bit about it and my role with them. This local development corporation, named for the neighborhood that it's in, Avondale, is the largest African-American neighborhood in Cincinnati. 93% of the residents are Black or African American. What makes Avondale so unique and special is that it is part of an area in Cincinnati called Uptown. And Uptown has a wealth and is rich in resources. It is the home of the University of Cincinnati. It's the home of the University of Cincinnati Medical Center and Children's Hospital. The Greater Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Gardens is located in Avondale. It is adjacent to another university, Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. It is at the crossroads of a multi-billion-dollar development area called Uptown. And it is 8 minutes from downtown Cincinnati. So the Development Corporation in recent years has really been trying to maintain the residential character of the neighborhood for existing residents while welcoming new residents to the neighborhood. And I will just tell you that the existing residential character of the neighborhood is really older, Gothic style mansions that have been converted to multifamily housing. And there's a predominance of subsidized housing in the neighborhood. And so my role in my action in evoking social justice is really helping the Development Corporation, come up with strategic plans and land use plans that really help them to counteract the efforts of gentrification and displacement of current residents. And so when I think about, and as we think about, social justice as values, and you can go to the next slide, Todd, I want to just remind you that APA does have a social equity task force. And that task force published a report last year, has a lot of recommendations about how you can really take action to, implement this social justice aspirational principle. And it really says that this principle are really the values that we live by as planners, access, equity, inclusion, rights, participation, and civic engagement are all the things that really combine in this aspirational principle that says we have to take action around. And so what does that mean for planners? In the area of access, and you can go to the next slide, it means promoting greater equity of access to, minority businesses in your community and supporting land use and zoning, that increases goods and services to areas that are resource poor. And when we think about urban planning, zoning and subdivision regulations and our long range and area planning efforts, it really gets to social justice planning, really gets to the heart of health impacts and health impact assessments and how we create healthy communities that house healthy people. And so, another one of those values is equity. How do we provide technical assistance and outreach, to areas that need it? How are we inclusive? How do we engage in outreach, and target minorities and underrepresented groups in our community meetings, in our land use planning, in our boards? Communities that we serve. And of course, participation and civic engagement is what we do a lot of. And so making sure that we ask the question, who's not at the table? Who's not at our meetings? Who's not in decision-making capacities in the work that we do are really those values that we want to aspire to. And so I think next I'm going to turn it back over to Greg and Todd to begin our scenarios. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. Is that better? So Todd, go back to that other slide because I want to pause there and ask Chris if there are any questions or comments at this point before we jump into the scenarios.
Yeah, we're getting not so many questions, but just comments generally about how people feel about our planning profession, and particularly when it comes to zoning codes, and even just how our profession is broken up, by race. There were a few comments, and this is something, at least at APA Ohio, that we're talking about, and I know that it's a national discussion. But when we're specifically talking about the diversity within our profession, there's a couple comments about how, it needs to start with the schools. And we need to start with the planning schools in high school, the undergraduate programs, the graduate programs. That's where the work needs to begin to increase the diversity within our profession. And like I said, we've been having a lot of conversations about that. Do any of you have any comments specifically about that before I move on to some of the other themes that I'm seeing?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm a adjunct faculty at the University of Cincinnati, so I talk to the students a lot, and one of the questions we typically ask them is, how did you get to planning? And it's interesting that so many of the students, at least in that program, are almost back into planning, right? They start by looking at other professions. They don't really know planning exists in high school. They're backing into it. They start looking at architecture. They start looking at engineering, and then they discover this thing called planning. And I think that's a very insightful comment that, you know, it is going to start with the education. It starts with the planning schools, but then you can back up from the planning schools to recruitment in high school and making people even aware of the profession. So I think that's a good comment.
And there are some folks asking, and I know that this might be a little bit off topic because this is related more to APA as an organization, but there are a couple of people asking questions about the breakdown of everything, you know, from gender to race within APA. And I'm gonna try to find that info while we're here today and see if I can't find that, because I'm sure that it's around. Kind of going back to the email, Greg, that kind of sparked this whole thing, and the topic of affordable housing specifically. There's a lot of comments on kind of what's constituting affordable housing, and the difference between just requiring or having rental homes versus actually affordable housing, because just, you know, renting is not the same.
Right.
Do you have any comments about that specifically, and ways in which planners can further kind of nail down the difference and make sure that any changes that occur within codes or plans or anything get to the meat of the issue the best that they can?
That's actually probably a good segue into the first scenario,
Okay,
because that's exactly what we're trying to get at there. So let's maybe put that on the table, and then come back, and Todd and Jacqueline, see if you have comments about that, because that's exactly what we're trying to deal with here. So we've got three scenarios. I don't know if we're going to get to all three scenarios. I like the discussion format here, but this is the first one, and this is a scenario that is essentially what you were just describing, Chris, housing choices, in this case in a suburban setting. And this is a very real situation. As a consulting planner, I've run into this discussion many times. So here's the scenario. You're a planning director in a suburban community that recently updated its comprehensive plan, completing it before the emerging movement to re-examine what equality means in America. As part of that process, you, the planner, you raised the need to provide more diverse housing options. The response that you heard from citizens and elected officials included some acceptance of the idea, but you hear this language, but only under certain circumstances. And these quotes are all things that I've heard, and probably many people on this call have heard. Only if it's high quality, quote, high quality. Condos are okay, but not rental units. In other words, ownership of non-single family home is okay, but not rental. Only if it's consistent with our community character, another buzzword that means different things to different people. And let's focus on housing for aging residents who want to age in our community. In other words, we see a lot of communities who are saying things like, yeah, we get the idea that the aging baby boomers, you know, some of them on our city council and our planning commissions, no longer want to care for the single family home, but so they need options for how to stay in the community. So the point is that the result of the scenario was the inclusion of modest policies for housing choices with very little acceptance of anything other than single family residential land uses. And just to editorialize on the question, Chris, you know, this issue of affordable housing comes up, and the question in these settings is almost always affordable for who? You know, one of the other things we hear a lot about is our teachers and firefighters can't afford to live in our community. It's always interesting. We go to teachers and firefighters are the people that we want to be able to, they don't talk about the planners being able to afford to live in the community, but the teachers and firefighters, right? And I think there's a certain amount of code language in there, which is, you know, affordable, but we don't really mean affordable for low income residents. We're talking about affordable for people who, you know, work in our community and are professionals in our community. So that's an editorializing. So the rest of the scenario, you're now leading the effort to update the zoning code after the comprehensive plan is complete. What is your ethical obligation to advocate for stronger social justice efforts? So we put some choices out here. So let's do this. Jacqueline, did you want to make a comment? Yes, go ahead, jump in. Oh, okay. I thought Jacqueline was going to make a comment. Okay. So we put these options out here, and Chris, you want to put the polling slide up, and we'll go through them?
Yep, I'm getting it ready right now. So everyone, make sure you're on your screen. I'm going to go ahead and launch the first scenario question.
Okay, so we've given you 5 choices here. We're asking you to pick, I think it's up to 3, or can you do all, Chris, any that apply?
Let's just do, well, I don't know. Let's see what we got. I guess maybe the ones that you feel are the most appropriate.
Yeah, so whatever you think are the most appropriate, click those. And then we'll take some comments and questions and see where it goes from here. So one of them is recommend that the comprehensive plan policies be reconsidered. In other words, go back to the comprehensive plan and address it at that level. The second one is conduct a zoning regulation audit to identify barriers to affordable housing, to alternative housing. Another is promote a public education process to build better awareness. Another one is work with elected officials to build political support. And then finally, raise the issue with the city manager and take your lead from them. And I'm sure there are others out there that folks can suggest, but let's have the opportunity to do this and see what kind of results we get.
Okay, I'm just going to give it a few more seconds here. Yeah. I'm just waiting until we get to a certain percentage here of folks voting. And I'll say there's a comment. I mean, we've had over, I think, 100 comments come in so far. I'm trying my best to organize them all. But the last one that I just saw, someone said scenario 1 is an important example of the benefits of a tiered government system and the need for strong leadership at not only the local government levels, but at your higher levels of government as well.
Good point.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close up this poll. And then I'm going to show the results. Okay, so what we have here, the first response option recommend that the comprehensive plan policies be reconsidered and strengthened to establish a policy basis for social justice. 67% of our attendees chose that one. Option 2, conduct an audit of your zoning regulations to identify barriers to affordable housing, 86%, which is our highest percentage of the 5 options. 3, promote a public education process to build better community awareness, 72%. Work with your elected officials to build political support, 54%, and raise the issue with your city manager and take your lead from him or her, 16%, which was our lowest percentage. So before I close down these results, do our panelists want to engage a little bit about these percentages?
Sure. I'd like to make a comment, Christine, that I think that from the top 2, okay, conduct an audit of the zoning regs and also promote a public education process are really kind of have to go hand in hand. Those are really critical to really expanding housing choice. Okay, and so if you jump to recommending comprehensive plan changes right away, then I think you could be defeating the purpose because you haven't really educated the public and you haven't set the stage by looking at and identifying the barriers.
And there was a comment that just came through that I think blends nicely with what you said. I think it's a combination of the top 4. Many communities like mine aren't at a level of community readiness. So the public education process is critical.
I agree.
Yeah, Christine, I would like to add here too. I think this is where there's sometimes going to be a disconnect between your elected officials and your planning commissioners. So let's say you do the best process, you bring forth a recommendation, and there could be different scenarios. There could be your elected officials support it, but then the folks on your planning commission, if they're like a lot of planning commissions, they're older, retired people, and sometimes their viewpoint is different, or vice versa. And to me, this is where you have to align policy directives. What is your city saying they're going to do? And if your city says they're not going to do any of this, then it's going to be difficult to get something approved. And then vice versa, if they say they're going to support these kinds of changes, it has to work its way down into the appointed folks as well. So there's a lot of issues that are at play that I think we probably don't always think it's in the hands of the planner, and that's just the beginning.
And I'll interject one more time and say that there's some comments coming through that folks are actually, that they're a little surprised that the fourth option, working with elected officials to build political support, is only at 54%, just because they're obviously key to making any changes. There's a lot of comments coming through about the education of these elected, these decision makers is so paramount to this entire process as well, that they need to be involved from the very beginning. Greg, do you have any comments?
And Chris, you know, I'm speculating here, but one of the reasons, yeah, can you hear me, Chris?
Yes. And now
Chris,
I can't.
Can you hear me?
We don't know what happened to you.
Okay, I was just going to say that
yes, we can hear
one
you
of
now.
the potential, okay, I must be going in and out. Okay, why don't you move on? I might be having a signal problem here.
Okay. Okay. Are we good with the
Chris, why don't you go on to the next
responses
scenario at
to
the top?
scenario one?
Yeah.
Todd, would you like the controls back? Okay. Okay.
Okay. So the
I'm
second
giving you the
scenario
controls
is,
back, Todd.
okay. Are you seeing the scenario on the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is also about affordable housing, but this was in more of an urban setting. So the scenario here is that you're a planning director in a large Midwestern city, struggling with availability of affordable housing, and your new mayor directs you to study your zoning code with the goal of eliminating single-family zoning as a way to promote density and increase affordable housing units. So so this is something that is happening. You all know this. It's happened in a few cities across the country. And if you're reading any of the recent articles that Greg and I'm sure Jacqueline and I have all been seeing over the last few weeks, as we kind of finalize this presentation, there's all of these articles about zoning and this notion that single-family zoning, I'm sorry, is kind of like the second way that we, after we legally segregated, this is how we found a way to really segregate through legal means. So anyway, it's very interesting reading. But anyway, so not that it's ever lasts too long. So we've got some options here for you to all pick from. And I will just go through these really quickly. Let me do this, Christine, because once you go into the mode where you're doing the poll, oh, I can't see the poll.
I'm sorry,
I can
I
still
already
read it.
clicked
It's
my
fine.
button.
I'm sorry. So one, it's okay. So remember, you're the planning director. So you just say, hey, I'm out of here. I'm going to retire rather than deal with this. You could form a task force of neighborhood leaders and housing advocates to reach consensus before you move forward. You could complete the study, prepare all the necessary reports, maps, ordinances, and begin the public hearing process without engaging the public in advance. So the difference between the first for 2 and 3 is when you decide to engage. The fourth option, you could assemble a team of housing industry leaders to push this process through as quick as possible, although it will likely lead to widespread gentrification. And then the fifth option is you can convene several stakeholder groups for a year-long study to gain widespread support, although you don't expect to be able to reach consensus. So those are the 5 choices.
Okay, I'll give it just another minute, folks. So from this, maybe choose your top 3 if you know, if possible. There's definitely an overwhelming response. I'll keep the suspense building for a moment.
I'm gonna guess they're all just going to retire.
That's just you, Todd. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close up the poll here. Decide to retire. Yeah, people like that one. You know, in this moment in our world, you know, we just give up, right? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close this poll, and then I will launch those results. Okay, I'm gonna take our big player first here. Overwhelmingly, 91% of our respondents are saying form a task force of neighborhood leaders and housing advocates to reach consensus before moving forward. 44% are saying gather several stakeholder groups for a year-long study to gain widespread support, although you don't expect to be able to reach much consensus. Tied at 11%, complete the study and prepare the documents to begin the hearing process without engagement in advance. And also at 11%, assemble a team of housing industry leaders to push the process through as quick as possible, which may lead to widespread gentrification. And then coming in at a 6%, let's just give up. So those are the responses. Before I take the screen away, I'm gonna read through some of these comments. No
we
comments.
don't hear you, Christine.
You can't hear me?
Okay, now.
Oh, okay. I was just asking if anyone.
Now we can. You're back. We could not hear the comment.
Oh, okay. I couldn't tell you what happened. If you want to go ahead and make some comments, it's probably because there's so many people on the line. We tend to have more technical issues this way. So if you as the panelists want to make any comments, I'm going to kind of read through some of these comments here online. So go ahead if anyone would like to say anything.
Well, I would just start by saying, the challenge, as someone who, would consider having to oversee a process like this, I mean, I think the real rub is between the neighborhoods, So if you're going to introduce a change that could potentially impact your existing residents, I think you really have to do some work with them to have them better understand why you are proposing to do what you're going to do. And I think that this is really, gets at the heart of the issue, and that is, if we've created neighborhoods that are segregated either by race or by income, the people that could benefit from the change typically wouldn't have a voice. So that's where I think it's really important as the planner to not only get that voice in the room to have it heard, but also to be able to educate all the existing residents why it's important. And that's the challenge, as I see it anyway. So I'm curious what some of the questions or comments are.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I also want to just interject also
I don't know if
that
Greg or Jacqueline have comments.
Sure.
Yes.
So I wanted to interject that, I believe that forming the task force is really an important step, having lots of people at the table, because the whole notion of removing single family zoning really strikes at the heart of what people think about when they think of, community living and neighborhood life. But we as planners know that, you can have really healthy, dynamic, fun neighborhoods where there is more than just single family housing. And so, yeah, I agree that the task force would have to be diverse and come from lots of different disciplines and probably different parts of the world where, we do know that there are communities where people live in different income types and different housing styles very successfully. Okay, I'm not sure where Christine is.
What are some of the comments you're getting, Chris?
We can't hear you, Greg. You have to unmute.
Greg, I think you might be muted. I'm gonna go over the comments.
Yeah,
I just want to ask real quick because there's so many people on the line. We're having trouble with this.
I'm not muted.
Can everyone just go off your webcam? Okay. Can everyone just go off their webcam? Sometimes that helps with the sound quality. So while we can't see your fabulous faces, let's just try that. Sometimes that helps with our sound quality when we have so many folks on the line. There's a lot of comments coming through just about needing input from everyone, and that sometimes getting input even from the community itself can be the hardest input to get in terms of just everything from having a public meeting to having community leader task forces, that it can be a struggle sometimes.
Christine, we lost you again.
I'm sorry. I'm going to try hooking on to a different. Okay. Can you hear me now? Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to switch my audio.
Yes.
There are some questions coming in about the hardest people to get a hold of are the community members themselves in forming task forces. Do you have any comments on that?
Sure,
yeah, I
do.
think that's
one
of the most difficult challenges we have on this topic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Jacqueline.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So when we talk
Go
about
ahead,
equity
Jacqueline.
and inclusion, I think that really reaching groups of people that either we don't always are involved with or connect with, or those people that are not always connected with City Hall are going to will be the most difficult part of the task. But it's our obligation as planners to really engage ourselves in unique outreach efforts. And one of the ways that we do that is being involved in the communities that we serve in a lot of different ways. And so if we are involved in communities that we serve or the neighboring communities that we serve, then, you know, as a planning team, as a planning department, then we have we have better ways to engage with the people that we're trying to serve. And so, yes, we acknowledge that it's really difficult, but we also acknowledge that we have a responsibility to rise to the challenge and reach the people that are hard to reach and bring them into the process.
Okay, I'm now, I just switched
Other
my audio.
comments?
Can everyone hear me okay? Folks that were having these issues.
Yes.
I'm just going to ask that each of our panelists switch over to their phone if it's possible. I think you're going to have a better sound control if we do that versus the sound coming through your phone or through your computer, if everyone doesn't mind. And perhaps we should just move on to our next scenario, if that's okay with everyone else. So
Okay.
Todd, if you want to go ahead.
I'm ready for scenario 3.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Martha, can you hear me? Christine,
Okay.
Todd?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the next scenario really has to do with housing policy and business influences on those policies. You're a senior planner. You're working in a first-ring suburban community. That community has really managed to maintain a solid base of housing serving low and moderate income families due to a robust employment base in the city. The city is home to the largest African-American community in the county, and it has a mix of housing stock that ranges from market rate to affordable to subsidized. Well, the city has landed a new company that's going to be serving a really growing business sector, and housing in the area and in this city in particular is becoming a hot commodity. So as a result of that, City Council has directed the planning department to prepare an anti-displacement and gentrification policy. And you as city senior planner, in your meetings with the local business executives, they suggest that you hold off on presenting your alternatives until they negotiate the purchase of a large tract of land that's currently affordable housing so that they can redevelop the site for mixed-use market rate development without a big public input session. And so you have some choices to make, some ethical choices to make. And if Todd, you can go to the next slide, or Christine, if you can pull up the choices, the polling choices.
Of course. I am going to go ahead and launch the poll.
We want you to select your top 3 choices. You can alert your director and let them handle it. Work quietly with the company executive so that they can negotiate their purchase before you present your alternatives. You can insist that they work with the community and the city to develop a community benefits agreement. Of course, you're informing them of what that is and why it is a benefit to all. You can inform the company executives that public engagement with members of the community can help rather than hurt the process. Or you can go public to the community and to the media about the possibility of gentrification backed by the business community. So please select your top 3 choices for this scenario.
Okay, we'll give it just another second here.
Okay.
And it looks like in this one, you're only allowed 1 choice, not your top 3. We're only doing one for this one.
Okay. Select one then. What is your choice? How would you handle this?
Okay, we'll give it another second here. This is great. A lot of the folks are responding. Someone wants the retire option again.
I bet.
Okay, I'm gonna give it one more second here, and then we'll close up the poll and show some results. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close that poll.
Okay.
Share our results. All right.
Okay.
So let's go over these. It looks like 59% insist that they work with the community and the city to develop a community benefits agreement to protect current residents of the area. Next is 25% inform the company executives that public engagement with members of the community can help rather than hurt the process. 14% is alert your director, let them handle it. 1% is go public about the possibility of gentrification backed by the business community. And no one is interested in working quietly behind the scenes with the company executives so that they can negotiate their purpose. So with that, I'll leave these up here. I will look through some of these comments. Would any of our panelists like to say anything?
Yeah, Chris, this is Greg. I'm back on my phone. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Listen, I think everything is much better now that we're all on our telephones.
Okay.
Technology,
so,
I tell you. Thanks, Greg.
You bet. So it's interesting. Not only do people not want to work behind the scenes on this, but they also don't want to go what we have been calling the go rogue approach either, which is go public with this. But I do want to make a comment on the kind of serious joke about retiring. Todd put that in, and some people actually did it, and now people were asking about it here. I think there's a little bit of truth and reality behind that humor, and that is that I think there is a sense with this issue that while as planners we have the ethical obligation to seek social justice, I think there is a kind of a sense that it's an overwhelming kind of thing to tackle. I mean, those of us who have engaged in local community planning know how hard that is on kind of normal everyday issues. And when we deal with something like this, it can feel overwhelming. It's not an easy thing to do. And I think that's why this is such an important conversation to have. And I think with the reality that politically in this country right now, we are very divided. And while as planning professionals, we have this obligation, and I think it's not just an obligation. I think most planners in the profession believe in this. The reality is that a large swath of the political spectrum does not agree with it. And we're fighting pretty serious headwinds in a lot of communities. And, that's why I think this idea that let's just retire is kind of reflective of the reality that these are very, very challenging and difficult issues to deal with. So I personally would be interested in hearing what people are saying about this and what kind of reaction we're getting from the participants.
I would like to also comment about the wording of the option that received the greatest number of votes, and that is insist that they work with the community and the city, because I just want to impress upon you that, you know, in our role as planners, seeking social justice and working to expand choice and opportunity is not always easy or pleasant. And sometimes we do have to insist and urge and really take strong positions that help move the community in a direction that may provide greater choice and greater opportunity to those who are disadvantaged in some way. And so I just wanted to direct your attention to that intentional wording, that sometimes we have to insist that things are done.
Good point.
Todd, do you have any comments?
I'm sorry, I've been working on my technological problems, but I'm going to just agree with both of my presenters on that one. Sorry.
That's okay.
That's fine.
I will have more comments later.
There are a lot of, Jacqueline, when you brought up the insist, I guess, there's a lot of comments coming in about the difference between insisting or informing. And I guess as one of our comments say, I think in reality, the business community won't take action as in insist unless it is regulated. So I think there is a big difference in those two words of informing or insisting. And I guess my question to that comment is, in your opinions, do you feel the business community will take a suggestion or a strong suggestion or, you know, just being informed about this versus insisting it through regulation? What are your thoughts on how the developer would react to those two different words?
Yes, I agree that that the insistence has to come in the form of the regulations, because without it, then there is no obligation on the part of the developer to, you know, carry out certain actions. But I guess the point that I really wanted to drive home is that, you know, social justice work is not always easy, and that it's met with resistance. And so we have to take strong positions as we, and I'm reading from the principle again, as we urge the altercation of policies, institutions, and decisions that oppose the needs of those that are disadvantaged, either racially or economically. And so that's the spirit in which insist is used in this case. Are there other questions?
I'm looking through. They're all coming. There's a lot of the same, which is interesting.
Sure.
There is a flip side to this. It says, I disagree. I've worked with businesses for over 25 years. A business wants to reduce time. The business community is not opposed to engagement. Rather, the planning staff ethos is to see the business community as an adversary. And that actually, I saw that same kind of comment as the business community as an adversary come up a couple times here in these comments.
Yeah, certainly planners should not take the position, an adversarial position with the business community. Rather, you know, as we look at ways to really advance social justice, we have to understand that, you know, things have happened in a certain way and in a certain cadence for a very long time, and that we've prioritized some things over another for a very long time. And so if we are to really kind of change the way we serve our communities, then once again, we have to be in the resistor mode. And so that doesn't mean that we can't work together, but it means that we really have to, educate people about our positions, and really help them, in the dialogue rather than the debate. Okay, and there is a difference between those words. There's no winner and loser in this if we're dialoguing, but we come to a new understanding. Okay, and maybe I'm sounding too pie in the sky, but that's really how you work if you are really wedded to the notion of social justice.
And I think that question, the pie in the sky question, is an interesting one because I think, let me pose this as a question, and maybe the panelists can respond or the participants can respond. It seems to me like we are experiencing a kind of once in a generation movement here, that this is not just let's revisit social equity. This is the idea that there are forces that are moving now that are creating a sea change in attitudes. And I don't want to be Pollyannish with that because I understand the political climate in which we're operating. But, we do see evidence of businesses who are taking leadership to try to lead on this issue. So I guess the question that I'm thinking about as we ponder all of these issues is, are we in fact seeing a sea change that we can start to, look back at this era like people look back on the 1960s civil rights era? Or is this just the controversy of the month and everything is moving so fast that there's something new that's going to replace it? I just get the sense that there's a much deeper set of movements here that we're facing, and maybe it's not pie in the sky to think that we can actually see some change this time. I'd be curious to hear what people think about that.
Well, this is Todd. Are you hearing me? I think I'm connected.
Yes.
Sorry. I think that this is the question of the day, for us. Are we really seeing this change or not? And I think where it ends is kind of what I've already said, is what are the actions that we take, whether it's individuals, whether it's this planning profession, chapters, the national organization, but all of our business partners and all of the institutions that that make up our community. So if we start seeing our largest employers taking concrete actions to start to really change things, I mean, how can the city or the community, not respond correspondingly? So, I think this is the question. I'm hopeful, but I'd be interested to hear what Jacqueline or some of our participants have to say.
There's a lot of comments now coming in to back you up on this, Todd. We are in a moment, and this is our opportunity as the planning profession to do something about it. We have backing at this moment. We have the opportunity to make social justice changes, whereas what one commenter said that 6 months ago, 5 years, even just 6 months ago was not, it didn't seem possible. But at this moment in time, yes, we have the opportunity, we have the strength, we have that power behind us to make these changes. And one of the comments, let me see if I can go back and find it. There were several comments, particularly related to the developers, that they hold this certain amount of power, and I'm not so sure in this moment that they hold that same amount of power that they used to. Thoughts on that from our panelists?
Yeah, actually, I have very short. Go ahead, Greg.
No, you're good. Keep going, Todd.
No, I was just going to say that I have really, strong comments on this one, and there was an article that I read. I think it was from Strong Towns, but it was really this acknowledgement that we've created a system, and I'm talking about the development game that we all play, the zoning process and the development process and the building permit process that really is stacked to for people who are wealthy. So if you think about all of the entitlement processes you have to go through going through the zone change and all the stormwater requirements and all the environmental requirements and just name it. Like, we've created this system that's very complex, and it's all because of the rules that we've created. And it was really that article, reading it was the first time that I thought to myself, wow, I always thought I was this great planner because I treated everyone the same, take them through the process, and we have a process that's probably inherently inequitable. So it was really kind of a lightning bolt, in the head kind of moment for me, is just thinking about what it is that what we do and what we require people to do in order to do business or to build homes, whatever in our community. So I've been thinking about that ever since I read that article, and just wondering, like, have we been doing this wrong all these years? And now is the time that we get to really stand back and examine it and say, well, what do we have to do differently? Greg and I have talked about this a lot, so I'm sure he has some thoughts.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no question that there's this kind of disconnect, I think, between people who are advocating for social justice in many cases are also the most staunch defenders of strong zoning regulation, right? So we have, I think, this dichotomy in a lot of communities. You certainly see it in, some of the California communities where affordable housing is a particularly acute issue, and yet there's heavy resistance to people who would otherwise agree with affordable housing to modifying zoning regulations to, reduce the standards or to allow for more flexibility. So I love the phrase that you were quoting there, Chris, that we are in a moment, and I'm just really curious how we think about moving through that, taking advantage of being in that moment when we have such institutional buy-in, if you will, to our regulations and the difficulty in changing those regulations.
Sure. And so I'll just chime in to that, Greg. I think that, while we're in this quote unquote moment, that leadership across, all different levels of municipal organizations and community organizations really have to, take the mantle and run with it, because it really is a leadership issue. I mean, if you go back to this last scenario 3, it comes down to the leadership of the department, the leadership of the city and the city council members really working with, those company leaders to bring about change in the community in a way that benefits the current residents. And so, leadership takes many different forms, to the person, that lives in the community saying, I love this community and sure, I live in subsidized housing, but I want to stay here. And so it takes leadership at all different levels.
This is more, I don't know, this is personally a question for me, but someone wrote in with the title of a book, Give Vanishing New York a Read, Eye-Opening, and will make you rethink some of the past approaches. Some of the decisions we think we are making for the right reasons can turn out all wrong. It isn't that the truth about when we read about our past and look forward. And this is the part where maybe it's just for me, but I'm a bookworm. So if folks have read any particularly interesting pieces, whether it be a book or even, an article on everything related from gentrification to systemic racism, anything, because I know a lot of folks have been talking about books that they're reading lately just because now it's at the forefront of their brain. And it's just, there's all of these light bulb aha moments. And people are asking, it's called Vanishing New York. And the other thing is, and I was going to mention this, and actually APA Ohio, we're trying to get this guy, Richard Rothstein, I'm not sure how you say it. He just released The Color of Law, and he is all around the circuits right now, TED Talks, you name it, interviewed NPR. And he's just one of those guys that just has so much knowledge on this, and he makes it very clear the entire concept of systemic racism, how we got to the moment that we're at today, and particularly what we can do to pedal back and to retrace our steps and start over at this point. Another one, History of Racist Planning in Portland. That's another one. Capital City by Samuel Stein. Maybe I can get a list of all of these books that readings that people are posting, and we can post it on our webcast webpage. With that,
hey, Christine,
let's take a moment. Yeah.
Christine, I think for me the question is, and this is what I just keep thinking about over and over again, is why does it have to be one or the other? It either has to be a gentrified area or it has to be a poor area. And I think that's where we as planners have to ask, we either create the situation where we enable something to happen, or we treat an area as this depressed area that gets no attention. And it's like, why does it have to be one or the other? And that's the question I struggle with. How can we be in the middle? So I think that's the task in front of us as we think about our communities and development proposals. Sorry for interrupting you.
That's great, Todd. I appreciate that interjection. And I think it really gets back to, our aspirational principle and the values that we hold as planners, and how we impart them and educate, the people in the cities and counties and states that we work in.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And let me just piggyback on that, because I think ultimately the question still comes back to planners who are faced with these Code of Ethics mandates. How do we do this? And I think it comes back to by doing the things that planners are good at, and that is analyzing information. I know that sounds boring, but analyzing information so that people can understand it. It's understanding the interrelatedness of these decisions, the long-range consequences, and it's about engaging people in fair and open processes. And that's easier said than done for those of us who have, tried to organize a lot of public engagement, and you end up getting the same narrow demographic in public engagement that you tend to always get. So it's very challenging, but I think, ultimately it comes back to planners taking advantage of the skills that they have to, advocate for and seek for social justice using the skills that we have, that we're best at.
I think we have 5 minutes
before
left.
Before we get into any other comments here, there's one last polling question that kind of brings us full circle here in our discussion. And I'm going to give you all a minute to answer this. And it is, does someone want to read this question and frame it while I?
Yeah, sure. So this is Todd.
Okay, thanks,
This is Todd. So basically what we're asking is, should APA revise the Code of Ethics to move this section that we've all talked about from to be a rule of conduct rather than just being something we aspire to do. And Chris, I don't know if you set it up as a yes, no, or you set it up as the choices are shown here, because I can't see the poll. So
it's just select one, from strongly agree to strongly disagree.
Okay. So we're interested in what folks had to say about that. And based on the outcome of the answer, we may or may not forward it on to our friends at APA.
Anonymously, of course, from all of you. And as people are just typing in their responses, there's a lot of comments coming in about just the importance of public engagement. And I like this. Public engagement, if we're doing it correctly, should make us uncomfortable. And I resonate with that. And there are some comments as we're going to wrap up the poll here in a second, but there's a lot of questions about, how is APA able to enforce this particular code of conduct. I think we could probably say that about a lot of the statements in the Code of Ethics.
Yeah. So just so everybody knows, I talked about parts A and part B. There's part C, C, D, and E, which are essentially the procedural aspects. So in terms of the code of conduct, again, theoretically, if we violate that code, and typically it's going to be by complaint, somebody complains about that, there is an adjudication process involved with AICP, and the ultimate result could be the loss of the AICP credentials. And that's the difference between A and B. A is, even though it says shall, A is aspirational with no consequences if you don't accomplish it, and part B is mandatory, that you could face disciplinary action if you don't do that.
There are some comments coming in about, there are established limitations as a planner in regards to your employer or, whatever the code in your community states. And obviously that would be understandable that you can only work within the limits of your position, of course.
Well, and that's a good point, because if you read the full Code of Ethics, it acknowledges that there's a balancing that has to go on, that there are competing interests. There's language in the Code of Ethics, for example, about accepting the decisions of your employers. So there's no question that even in the Section B, the mandated section, that there is a balancing and good faith effort to comply kind of principle behind it. So, everybody should go read the Code of Ethics and look at how all of those are cast, but there are things in there like accepting the decisions of your employer.
I closed the poll down and I just posted the results, and based on the comments that I've been reading, I'm not surprised to see the results that I see. So 38% somewhat agree that the code should be revised to become a rule versus just something to aspire to. So 38% somewhat agree, 26% strongly agree, 16% somewhat disagree, 12% no position, 8% strongly disagree. And I would say that the majority of the comments I think that are coming in regarding this is that there's still a lot of gray area, and particularly, again, what planners at the end of the day are capable of, I guess, just in terms of their ability to actually get anything done versus a policymaker. And a lot of the comments that are coming in right now are talking about, how just the importance of getting our policymakers, our decision makers on board, because, the buck stops with them, right?
This is interesting, though. That's over 60% agree
64%
at some level or another.
Yep.
So here's my challenge.
Maybe we are in a moment.
So I would like to say, let's come back in 5 years and revisit it, I'm curious, like, if I could look forward 5 years and be like, we asked this question then, what the response might be. So I'm hoping that we are in a beginning of a new era. So anyway, that's my personal hope for us all and our country.
I hope we come
Well, and
back
my only-
sooner than 5 years. I hope we do this again, within the year. I hope that folks get in touch with the recommendations from your social equity task force, and also get involved in educating yourself about how to be more culturally competent to the communities that you serve.
We have to wrap up. A couple just quick housekeeping items so people don't hang up yet. One, folks are asking that at least this information, these polls, be forwarded to APA, and I think that's completely appropriate for them to have, just so that they know at least where us 989 people are thinking. We are recording this webcast, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube and it'll pop up. Just give me a couple minutes to get it up there. We will have a PDF of this session available on our Webcast webpage. Just head over to ohioplanning.org/planning webcast, and there's also where you can register for the rest of our sessions. I will try to get together a list of books that folks are suggesting, and I think one of the last things was the Strong Towns article. Folks were asking about Todd's reference to that, and the title is "Why Does So Much High-End Redevelopment Occur in Once Devastated Neighborhoods?" So I think that's it for my housekeeping items. If you need a certificate of attendance, if you're AICP, you shouldn't need one. You just go in and record your session. But if you're with a partner organization that requires a certificate, just email me, info@ohioplanning.org, and I will get it for you. It doesn't automatically come to you. So a big thank you to our speakers today for tackling this ethics topic in a really timely way. Jacqueline McRae, Greg Dale, Todd Kinski, Mega Sinha, I know you're still there in the background, and to the folks of the Central Ohio section, Nicole Martin, that helped pull this together. We're not done with this conversation. We'll be back, and I urge everyone to remember that we're in a moment as planners, and we have a little bit of momentum behind us, and we have some fire to work with. And I invite you all to continue this conversation with us. You can reach out to the speakers, to me, and this is just the beginning. And thanks everyone for joining us, and have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you all.